It was a week of underdogs making the big dogs sweat. We almost had a couple upsets, didn't quite get there. We had one dog win for the week, but that had the H-Town Pick'em aficionados wondering, do we have a parity problem in this league? All the playoff spots are decided. Is there any intrigue? What should the commissioner do about it? And what about those teams like our Houston Roughnecks sitting at one win out of the playoffs for these last 2 weeks? How's Coach CJ going to get them motivated? We're going to answer all those questions and more on a brand new episode of the H-Town Pick'em podcast. All right, welcome back to another brand new episode of the H-Town Pick'em podcast. Welcome to our new home, the brand new H-Town Pick'em studios. We're trying to up our game for you guys a little bit. As always, I'm your host, Coach Kovo, joined by my nose guard, Mike, my main man, CP, and the notorious Renegades fan, but he's more than just a Renegades fan. He's a Mavs fan. He's a Stars fan. They're all kicking butt and taking names. And Nick Beanie joining us in the house. We have a special guest today. He is unable to join at the moment. We hope he can join us later, but hopefully joining us will be the host of the Michigan Panthers podcast. FBI Tugboat is his name. You can't get any better than that as far as a name, but we're going to just go ahead and dive right into it. We got tons to talk about. And one new segment of the show is we have the aficionado mailbag, right? So all of our fans out there, the aficionados out there, the real ones, we want you to ask us questions. We want to make this interactive. So rather than us just thinking of things to talk about, we want you to send them in. And so you can do that below. If you're watching this now, go ahead and type your questions here in the comments section of YouTube. But ask your questions. We're going to talk about them next week. We had 2 questions coming in. Number 1, from Coach Jason Haddock, the defensive coordinator of the Clements Rangers, at Coach J. Haddock. He said 4 of the Roughnecks losses are by a score or less. What do they need to do to get over the hump to finish the season or to get over it for next year? And then our second question, I'll let you guys look at this one, then you can kind of pick which one you want to attack. Rob Latendre at Rob Latendre-PI8RU. He said, with the Stallions looking to go undefeated, 3 other teams at 6-2 and 3 teams at 1-7, what should the league do to help with parity? Now think about which one you guys want to answer there. Before we get started, I got to introduce my man Tugboat. He just came in here.
Hey.
Tugboat has entered the chat. Man, hey.
How we doing? Appreciate you having me. Appreciate you having me. Sorry for those couple minutes late.
What? No worries at all, Tug, man. So we're joining the United Football Media family. So for all of our viewers, we're going to be on the United Football Media as well. You're one of the stalwarts on the UFM, Tugboat. You've done a great job on your Panthers podcast, man. Just introduce our fans and just kind of tell them a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am first and foremost a commentator. That's what I do for my career. I work traditional sports plenty. I'm literally going up to commentate an arm wrestling competition in Montana in a couple weeks. Mostly what I do is esports though. Mostly Rocket League and Overwatch. I'm not sure how much you guys play video games and whatnot, but that is how I've made my nut in this world and absolutely love it. I also have a huge love for spring football. Also, I put this background up. I can do anything. Anything at all on the virtual camera. I can change it to whatever you want here, guys. But yeah, and so I joined the UFM week 3, I think, after making a little sample video there for week 2. They liked it, loved what I had, and brought me on in. I'm very appreciative of it.
I love it. Well, hey, we are starting to talk about with our aficionado mailbag segment. We had 2 questions come in. Let's go ahead and start with Obi. Which one do you want to tackle first? Do you want to tackle as far as how are the Roughnecks going to stay motivated, or do you want to tackle the second question from Rob about, well, you got teams that are 10-0 and you got 3 teams that have 1 win. There's not as much parity maybe as we had thought in the records. Is this something the commissioner should address? Which one do you want to take, Obi?
Let me take the latter. I'll take the second question. For me, I think as far as the team who's at the top in the Stallions, I think it's always good to have a team who is the measuring stick and the bar to reach. So I think they just got to keep on doing what they're doing. They don't rest on their laurels, but keep on improving the team. They lost Alex Mongo last year. He went on to the NFL, but they've been able to replace him with 2 competent enough quarterbacks, and then Martinez taking the starting job, and the roster is still well coached and well constructed, right? So with there, it's just a matter of keep on fine-tuning the edges, making sure that you don't relax and you don't rest on your laurels as far as the teams at the top. The team at 6-0, those are 2 good teams to kind of keep as far as competitive balance. Now, at the bottom is really where we have to pay attention. The thing with this being a spring league football league is that there is no farm system. There's no, college. There's no farm league. So you have to look at the talent in the league and on your team and where can we get better talent? Where can we get new talent? Maybe we have to get younger. Maybe we have to get these guys that want to be NFL guys. But, for me, I would look at guys who had good college careers, but maybe were undersized. Maybe they could be good players. Like if I was running a team in this alt league space, right? You want guys that are hungry and still want to play ball, but maybe just didn't get the opportunities in the NFL. And then you want to poach them away from the CFL because the CFL, you have to go overseas. So maybe instead of going to Canada, why don't you try this league here? You could stay in the United States. You may not make as much, which I wouldn't say, but you may not make as much, but you would get that exposure because you have the ESPN and all these big TV networks, right? So my target audience and my target pool coach would be these college players that maybe played a little bit longer. So, your redshirt seniors, you guys who graduated, who weren't drafted, but probably still have a little bit more hunger to play the game. Those would be the guys I would kind of try to go for. If I'm going to go for vets, then it's got to be guys who, maybe just it didn't work out with a particular team, but you really have to pay attention. So you got to have a good scouting department if you're struggling. And then you have to look, okay, do we have any locker room guys that, need to go, or, who are causing distractions? You get those out of the locker room, because bad cultures, bad chemistry, bad environments, you have to cleanse that. You have to rip the cancer out. Otherwise, it's going to continue on to the next season. So that would be my approach: is the teams at the top, don't rest on your laurels, keep on finding the edges, keep on pushing. And the teams at the bottom half of the league, you have to look at where to get your new talent or your coaches. Do we keep the coach, or do we get a new coach? Do we get a new voice? Does our coach understand this league, and is he the right man for this job? That's what I do.
Yeah, no, I mean, you brought up an interesting point as far as the draft. Like, I think about that, like, we're sitting here at 1-7.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it gives us favorable draft position, but are those players even desirable to the general managers? Just because, obviously the better players coming out of college have been drafted in the NFL. So by the time the ones that we're able to draft first, are they even as good as the guys that are a couple years ahead of them that are, made some NFL training camps? And maybe not, right? So it's not quite that same feeling. Oh, we got the number one college pick in the draft, because it's not like you're getting Caleb Williams or something like that, right? So I find that interesting. So you took it kind of from the team by team perspective. What about from the league perspective? Do any of you guys want to approach it from that? Like, I'm curious, like for Moose Johnston, is it bad that with 2 whole weeks to go, the playoffs are completely locked? And honestly, last week they were basically locked. Is it a bad look for the league in a 10-game sprint that after 70% of the games, these games don't really matter for very much? Is that a problem? Like, is it a bad thing? So, any of you guys want to approach it from the league? Should Johnston step in and do something? Obi, I'll let you finish your thought.
My bad. I would just say from the league perspective, because this is the first year of the UFL format and the merger, usually we have to kind of see what has happened in the first year, and then we kind of can we need to fix even maybe whether it's a parity problem, we need to bring in more talent, or we have to kind of shuffle things around like the Big Three does in their league, right?
Okay, I'm interested now. You're talking another alt league.
Another alt league, because in the Big Three, what they have is there's not free agency, but teams shift around, especially if a team was
there was the Luis Perez trade of last year. You're saying that could make that more commonplace.
It would be, because at the end of the day, you don't want teams to be 1-7. You don't want teams that are that bad. While we might say, oh, it's not fair, I don't think people really the sickos do, but everybody wants a competitive league and competitive games. So having teams, especially if a guy is not playing or not getting a chance, but he can go somewhere else and change another team's season, it can create some drama, it can create intrigue and interest, and that can help kind of boost the morale of that team and give it a little jolt like the Renegades had last year with Luis Perez. So I look at that and say, hey, as a league, okay, these teams didn't pan out as well as we thought. What can we do to kind of give them a little bit of a boost? Because you're not going to get that through the draft. You're going to have to shift some players around. You're going to have to shift some bodies around, shift some people around, and then you'll have a more balanced league.
I like your suggestion on the Big Three model. That's very interesting. Now, FBI Tugboat, I saw you raise your hand, man. What do you think?
Absolutely. You asked the question, if it was a bad thing, simple. Yes, terrible thing, right? You're guaranteeing that these teams don't have a whole lot to play for, and so why would teams that have punched tickets in the USFL division, my own Michigan Panthers and Birmingham Stallions, of course, play some of the best players on their team, given that you have 2 more games to go, and now especially with the USFL, I'm not going to get too much up on the soapbox here, but what's the very last thing after you clinch playoffs, and after that is no longer a conversation here, what's the very last thing that these teams play for? How about a little home field advantage? Nope, not going to happen. Wayne State Community College wins out in Ford Field. Greatest Michigan Panthers rival, Wayne State Community College is undefeated.
Is that not a bad look?
Yeah.
That a
Horrible.
community college graduation is trumping a professional football. And I get it, but it's just like, oh, man. And, another thing, and I don't know if Tug or any of you guys want to take this one. I don't like the way they set the schedule. It's like they tried to, like, the Week 10 matchups are going to be also the same as the conference championship matchups. It's going to be St. Louis and the Brahmas playing in Week 10, and they got to turn around and play each other again. And it's going to be Birmingham and Michigan playing each other in Week 10. They got to do it again. So I don't know if that was the league thought that those were going to be the marquee matchups. They wanted to make it kind of like a showdown, like Michigan versus Ohio State. But I kind of think you don't want to do that because it just removes quite a bit of drama. But hey, we're going a little bit over on this. I know you guys. Let's get CP and Nick in here. CP, man, can you take the Roughnecks side of it, man? You're the longest time season ticket holder. You're decked out, man. You're always tailgating. Can you let me ask, if you don't mind, taking Coach Haddock's question, Roughnecks specific. What do we do, CP? You and I are going to be there on Sunday cheering our hearts out, but what do we need to do to just get over this stench of the season that we've had? What do we got to do different just to make it through this year, and what do we got to change for next year?
Yeah, well, first off, for Nick's benefit, Coach Haddock mentions 4 Roughnecks losses by less than a score. Coach Stoops and the Arlington Renegades have 5. They're 0-5. So not the best in the league at losing by 1-score games. Bob Stoops holds that record. For this year, but at least what we have to do, it obviously starts at the top and make sure our coaches are in the game, are focused on the game, focused on the play calls. I feel like, our special teams was horrible to start the season, just muffed punts, blocked punts, just on both sides of the ball. So, players have to brunt a little bit of that, some of those came down to 1-2 plays, but it really starts with the coaching. I know there's a petition out there to get Coach Johnson off there. When we got Coach Johnson in, he kind of is what he is. We all knew it. He came from Tulane, 4 seasons there, went to 1 bowl game, barely won at Tulane. He's got some NFL coaching experience, but he hasn't really 5-5 last year in the USFL. So not a consistent winner as far as our coach, and he just hasn't proven that he can be that. They did win 4 games in a row last year, but yeah, it really has to be seeing Coach Johnson focused on the game, not using timeouts in inappropriate times. Some of those calls that are just inexplicable when it comes to coaches, and things that us as fans are noticing. We're very much involved in paying attention to the game. And I know Coach Johnson probably has a lot he's dealing with on the sideline, but players fighting amongst themselves or whatever it is that he has to deal with. But yeah, what can we do? I think a coaching change needs to happen, and that's really what gets you over the hump. And keep Bob Stoops on the Renegades. That'll be fine with me.
This guy. What?
Hey, Nick, before I'm going to give you your chance to fire back, but, I know FBI Tugboat loves the UFL Gambling Podcast. I've seen him commenting on there. I'm also a longtime loyal listener. I love those guys.
Oh, yeah.
J Mark, our guest for the Battlehawks week, came in, from that show, and they were talking about when we could listen in on the comms before the last play against Birmingham, or several of the plays, like, it became really obvious, like, Reed Sinnott was like Johnny Unitas, like, calling his own offense. It was Reed was just kind of saying, like, it was very hands off from Coach Johnson, who I believe had taken over the play calling reins at certain points of the game. And even that last play, the UFL Gambling Podcast guys are like, yeah, it seems like CJ's just kind of walking around talking and nobody's listening. They're all just, Reed Sinnis directing what play he wants. It just doesn't feel like control and leadership when I listen in on those comms. And I see Tugboat agreeing. But let's 100%. Wrap this one up. We're going to give 100%. Nick the floor to finish this out here, man. I don't know if you want to take your buddy Rob. I know Rob's a friend of yours. Do you want to go with Rob's question and just address a high level things that we need to do to help with the parity, or take it any direction you want, Nick?
Well, I did want to get a little into the Roughnecks situation as well. And I don't see where it says anything about the Renegades, CP. So why do we got to bring up Bob Stoops on this?
Catching strays, man. CP's fine strays.
I'll take care of the Renegades' misery when we get into the results portion of the show. But right now, let's just not worry about them. Let's worry about the Roughnecks, okay? So I'm a big fan of what CP said, though, when he said that they got to just focus towards the end of the games. And I used to not understand why coaches say obvious things. Like, for instance, if you're in field goal range, we cannot afford a sack. You'll hear coaches like Skip Holtz, who always tell the quarterbacks that kind of situation. He's like, hey, by the way, can't afford a sack. And I never understood it because I always thought, well, that's an obvious answer, right? But what he's doing is he's just regaining their focus and pay attention to the situation of the game. And I don't think Curtis Johnson does that. That's how you get all these sort of mistakes, like offsides when you don't want it, fumbles when you don't need it. Just show them that you have that attention to detail to the situation at hand as well. And if you have that as a coach, I feel like the players do respond to that kind of stuff, kind of like they do over at the Stallions, time in and time out, how they win those ball games. So that's my take on that. When it comes to the parity in the league, the only frustrating thing, especially with the losing football team that we have right now, is the air of uncertainty. I have no clue how they're going to do the draft next year, how they're going to approach it. I know I have a losing football team, and I don't see how in the NFL you could see how you get it better, right?
Yeah.
It's really frustrating on the UFL side. I'm just in the dark. I'm like, I just want to know the game plan going forward, heading into next year. But I know they're trying to tweak it. They're trying to get it all fixed up, and we'll get more answers later in the season. But I got to tell you, with the losing football team towards the end of the year, it is very frustrating because you just don't see a game plan to get your team better.
Nick, that's a great way to finish this out, man. That's a great point. Communication, maybe not the strong suit of the new merge. I'm gonna give him a pass. Year number 1, merging stabs and everything. But we talked about the playoff format was changed in the dark of the night, and none of us are told that, So we were kind of led to believe one thing. And yeah, I agree that the fans need to see a pathway of hope before they decide if they're going to re-up their season tickets, right? Like me and CP are season ticket holders. Like that would be nice if we kind of saw a vision of like the fun that we're going to have out there at the rig next year. But great stuff, fellas. Let's move on to our next segment. Looking back at last week's results. Here we were last week in week number 8. We all went. Myself and Nick went 2-2. Obi was 1-3 against spread, and CP is the guy that you want to follow right now. He's our top dog. 3-1 last week. CP was our only guy to hit our lock, and then against the spread, we actually missed our sweep. So all of us thought that the Arlington Renegades were going to cover against the San Antonio Brahmas, and we all fell short in that one. If we look at our year-long records against the spread, again, CP's cooking right now. 68.75. I want you to understand that 53% is kind of your break-even point in sports betting, typically with the juice that you have to pay or the vigorish that you have to pay. 50, you want to be above 53. CP's at 68. So if you've been tailing him all season long on these sides, you've made quite a bit of money. So congratulations to CP. I don't know if any of us are going to catch him. Obi and Nick are right there at the profit line, 53, and then yours truly here. I'm bringing up the rear. I had to fight to get back up to 50, so I'm on an upward trend, but still just 50% for me. Our locks have been poor. Now, we typically tell you, don't bet every single thing that we say, because you really want to maybe just bet your locks traditionally, right? You don't have to put money on every single thing, or you can stagger it. Maybe you put more units or more money on your lock and then less on the ones you're less sure of, but our locks have been poor. We're all about accountability here on the H-Town Pick'em podcast. We look at our records every week, we analyze them, but that's for you. That's for you to know which one of us you want to listen to, or if you want to mix some of us, but CP is the guy, right? 62.5, that's great. The rest of us, Obi at 50, and then myself and Nick have just struggled on locks. So I would say fade myself and Nick. I have no qualm saying that because I want to make you money. And then the last thing, if you've been trailing our spreads, we're still at 70%, even though our sweeps when all 4 of us pick the same side, we're 7-3. So we've been cooking on that. So you probably still want to trust us when we go with a sweep. All right, now moving on to the week that was week number 8. I'm going to kind of buzz through this, but you guys can stop me at any time if you want to go in a little bit deeper. And, of course, Tugboat, if you want to, I'll let you talk more about the Panthers game specifically. And that's where we're actually starting.
I just have one question. None of you guys pushed any bets at all this entire season. I've pushed more bets this season across 7 weeks of a league than I ever have in my entire betting career, ever, for anything. I think like
Tugboat,
5 or 6 of them.
Thank you for asking that, Tugboat, because that's a great question. We kind of rigged the game a little bit.
Ooh,
we
nice,
look for lines that have a half point because we don't want to deal with ties and pushes as far as us keeping track of our records and stuff. So that's the reason. We're always going to take a line that has a half point. But you're right. So this is a great point. You definitely want to shop around. Just because we're saying the spread was 8.5, you might find something better. So always shop around. But great point, Tugboat. But first game, Showboats 18-24. CP, we split on this one. CP and Nick went with the Showboats. Myself and Obi, we went with the Panthers to cover 8.5. The biggest thing for me is that the Jake Bates missed field goal. Yes, it was far. I believe it was. I think it was at least. It was in the 50s, I believe. I remember correctly. But
51
he missed
exactly.
First miss at home, and so that could have been the difference in getting the cover. I thought that Bryce Perkins. I'm very high on Bryce Perkins. I thought he would kind of power them to a cover here. It looked good at times, but you got to credit the Showboat. So, FBI Tugboat, man, you just kind of tell us your thoughts from this game.
You hit the nail on the head, my friend. It was 51 yards, the first missed field goal inside, again, for first missed field goal in Ford Field, which is, of course, the first missed field goal of his adult career inside ever. I also had 8.5. I felt really, really good about this. I went 2-2 last week. This is one of the ones that I missed, and the Stallions that I missed. The other two I felt like I shouldn't have even hit. That was Arlington and the over in that game.
And then for new viewers, the green just signifies Obi locked this one in, and so Obi missed his lock on that one. I thought it was a good lock to take, but didn't get that one. The Houston Roughnecks, myself, CP, and Nick, we all went for our hometown side, even though they were in Birmingham, and they played well. 16.5 point. That's the biggest UFL spread that we've ever seen on this show. So it was history making. Obi's been siding with the Stallions all year. It's paid off well for him. So they did it one more time, but it was just too many points to cover. Maybe a little bit of a letdown spot, after that emotional win against the Battlehawks. The Roughnecks, honestly, forget covering. They could have won this game, honestly, at certain points. Maybe at the end of the day, the Stallions could have always just pushed a little bit harder on the pedal to beat them at the end. That's probably true. But we had them stopped. And at the very end of the first half, we had them stop punting deep in their own territory. In typical Roughnecks fashion, we get an offsides penalty. And it's just infuriating. And it's like we can't even throw up our hands and get angry anymore because we're almost conditioned to just expect this at this point because it has happened every single week. I'm a former coach, so I'm really slow to criticize coaching. But I've even gotten to the point, as you've seen throughout the season, it's unacceptable. It does fall on the coach at the end of the day. I mean, I've been on good teams, I've been on bad teams. Either way, the responsibility is going to fall on the coach, and so that has to be cleaned up. Attention to detail has to be paid, and it's just not good enough. But myself, CP, and Nick, we all got the cover, and so we feel good about it. And maybe it's a confidence booster. The team really did look good. CP, can you just talk about Nolan Henderson a little bit, man? Because I know you always point out to me, it's interesting. You always bring him up and you say Nolan is so much smaller than the other quarterbacks. You just always pointed that out to me because we have those season tickets up near the bench and everything. But tell me about Nolan Henderson because he played really well.
Yeah, he's got the stature of PJ Walker, right? When you look at him, when you see him. So, I'm calling him Nolan Blue Henderson because he, went to Delaware and was a blue man.
The blue
but always excited to see new talent come on board, especially at the quarterback position when your team is sucking. So it's just exciting to see some new blue blood in there, some blue hen blood come on into the game. And possibly invigorate an offense. We've seen it with some of these other teams that are able to use multiple quarterbacks. Some of them are due to injury, and some of them are just because the team needs to go in another direction. So I think Nolan deserves a chance to lead this team for the last two games. I don't think he will, especially with Sinet hitting over 1,000 yards and doing what he's doing. But yeah, stature-wise, Garantano and Sinet are so much bigger and imposing, at least when you're looking at them, than Nolan Henderson. It barely looks like you can see over the offensive line, but I mean, it wasn't a problem for those mobile quarterbacks like PJ Walker. So I think Nolan Henderson, if given the opportunity, whether it's the last two games of this season or next season, I think he should be given a shot.
All right, moving on to the Sunday slate. The DC Defenders, CP locked this one in. CP felt good about this one. CP took all dogs, which I've never seen CP do, but he took all the dogs on week number 8. Myself and Obi also got on the Defender train. Nick liked the Battlehawks to defend home turf up there in the Battle Dome, and they get the win. I actually came into this thinking DC was going to find a way to win. I just did. I was fading the Battlehawks just because of the letdown spot again, the emotional game in Birmingham the week before, AJ McCarron being out of the game. I think that was a big reason why it took forever to get the lines. Just trying to know who's going to play at quarterback was a big one. Manny Wilkins played well. I got to give him credit. I mean, I thought he did a really good job, especially, using his legs to extend plays. I think he rushed for like 80 yards. I believe he's the leading rusher for the Battlehawks. And he actually was, I was doing research on him. He's a former Elkins High School quarterback, which is actually the rival. Obi and I and our team, Ridgepoint Panthers, that was our number one rival a couple years before Obi. And I think he did eventually move to California, but he was at Elkins for a short time. But Manny played well, led him to a victory. But it is the Defenders that get the cover. So CP still in fuego. He gets his cover to hit. Just been a snake bit year for the Defenders. I know that there was on the United Football Media. I haven't been able to watch it yet, but there was a funeral procession on the DC Defenders show. I do plan to hopefully watch that sometime tonight or tomorrow. But Defenders fans have been so accustomed to winning, and it's just been one of those years for them. So tough year for the Defenders. And the final game, this is one of those few times. This is what we call a sweep, everybody. All four of us were on the side of the Renegades. I've talked about the travel factor, how Arlington to me has a big built-in advantage that everyone is based out of Arlington. So Arlington's travel is way less than the other teams. So I actually thought it would be similar to last year, where down the stretch, you would see the Renegades start playing better. After last week's shellacking of the Showboats, I thought, okay, it's happening. Just as I projected, didn't happen. The thing with the Brahmas, I think everybody likes to think about AJ Smith and the weapons, like Lovett, on offense and all the great receivers, Kirkland, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, it's actually the defense of the Brahmas, the defensive line in particular, that is really powering them. And I think that's where I made the mistake. I think I'm not giving enough credit to the Brahmas defense. Do I think, and I'm a little bit of a spoiler, do I think they can compete at the highest level to win a championship? I don't. But that defense is legit. They are very legit, and they do get the covers. A little bit of a slow second half, though. If you're a Brahma fan, maybe you're kind of concerned. The second half was, Renegades were able to mount a comeback, but that was everything that we have for the week. Let's move on to the next segment of our standings and futures. All right, looking at standings and futures, and I messed up here. I'm getting new to the StreamYard. I have a little intro for you. My man Webb made that for us. I want to make sure that I did get that in there. But let's look at the standings and future. We've actually kind of forgotten to do this for a couple of the weeks because it's my fault. But if we look at them here, here's the most recent DraftKings odds that I looked up this evening. This was the week before, and these were the opening odds. So it's just really interesting to me. Like if you were on the Defenders, the Stallions at the very beginning, you had plus 300 odds. I definitely got in on that. It's anytime you can get Defenders at plus or Stallions at plus money. I jumped in on that. So I've got money myself on the Stallions. I took some Defenders futures. I got the Battlehawks. I basically got all the contenders. I don't have any San Antonio shares. I've been off of them personally. But as far as what's changed, the Stallions, they went from 145 to 155. So the odds makers kind of shortening the odds there a little bit because it does seem like they're probably going to win it. The Battlehawks odds actually went up. So it's more valuable for you. So even though they did win their game, I think people are starting to think in Vegas that the Stallions are going to be your champion. So if you want to still get some Battlehawks, you can get a little better value here. The Brahmas are staying the same. I think in Vegas's mind, they're kind of locked in on what they are, that they are going to be a playoff team, but they're maybe the fourth or third best. I don't think Vegas is seeing them as a contender. Even though they won, their number stayed the same. The Panthers won, and they actually their odds got a little bit longer. So they went from 900 to 950. So a little bit of disrespect thrown at the Panthers. I don't get that. To me, like their odds should be getting shorter, especially if Bryce Perkins coming in. So this was the one that's kind of like raised my eyebrow. This is malpractice here. We've got to contact the Better Business Bureau. I don't know why they're still advertising futures for these four teams. They're all eliminated. And it's interesting. The DC line, their odds got shorter, even though they're eliminated. It went from 3,000 to 2,800. So we'll just let anybody want to just anything you want to share as far as the futures. And of course, we have our standings here. We've talked about, there's some really bad teams and some really good teams, not a whole lot in the middle. Anybody want to jump in on any recommendations for the fans on futures?
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, CP.
Okay. Yeah, obviously the best value there are the Panthers and the Brahmas, and I think the Panthers actually have a good deal. If they end up winning against the Stallions in the championship game, I think that they will be favored against whoever they play, depending on AJ McCarron's health. The rest of the season. So, if you want to get
even
in
with
now,
the home field advantage in the Battle Dome, because it's going to be in St. Louis for sure. So if St. Louis makes it, they're going to have home field.
Right. Even that, and it just depends on the players that are playing. I think it all depends on McCarron's health, and I think that the Panthers could get a slight edge. I don't think the odds are going to get any worse for the Panthers, especially after the next few games that they have. So I would definitely think about putting just a tiny bit of money on the Panthers if you're looking at least one of those four teams, and you don't think it's going to be the Stallions, which sometimes I feel like just you're throwing away your money if you don't put it on the Stallions. But if you're thinking of any other team, think about the Panthers.
I'm a small time bettor. I've got enough money. Like I've got most of my money on the Stallions and the Battlehawks to where I'll make like $13 if one of them wins. It's something silly like that because I'm just trying not to lose money. But I did put some money on. I basically put money on the Panthers just enough to like break even. I just don't want to lose money if somehow the Panthers find a way to win it. So that's what I did. FBI Tugboat, are you still there? Or I don't know if your screen
Absolutely.
went blank. Do you want to add any futures recommendations for the listeners?
Yeah. Future recommendation. Find yourself a time machine. Go back to late March or so and lay it down there on the Birmingham Stallions and the St. Louis Battlehawks, like I did. In all seriousness, though, kind of similar to what CP said there. Only thing that I see here is the Michigan Panthers. I really don't see the Brahmas beating the St. Louis Battlehawks if A.J. McCarron comes back, which he is slated to do. And even if they make it, then the Stallions are just that guy. They have been since preseason. This kind of goes back to your point earlier about parity a little bit. The fact that the small time gambler like me could even see the Birmingham Stallions and the St. Louis Battlehawks were the clear number one, number two preseason. I think kind of shows to your point about parity.
All right, we're moving into the final segment here. This is what you've all been waiting for. Let's try to make you some money. The picks and the locks segment. The St. Louis Battlehawks are coming in at 6-2. They had the 26-21 win against the DC Defenders. We put this line at 3.5, kind of like Tugboat was talking about. I've actually seen a lot of 3 on this. I just saw 3.5 when I first looked at it earlier in the week. It's coming down to 3. So I just left it at 3.5 just so we can have an odd number so we don't get any pushes for our records. But you can probably get this at 3. So that means that if you like the Battlehawks, you definitely want 3 rather than 3.5, right? So just make sure you find that number. The Renegades coming in at 1-7. They had the 20-15 loss at the San Antonio Brahmas. Okay, I'll go first here, fellas. I'm gonna do it one more time. I'm gonna side with you, Nick. I'm gonna go with the Renegades. I'm gonna stay with my initial prognostication that the Renegades would get hot down the stretch last week. I'm just gonna say that they stubbed their toe. They still look good at points, but they just cannot play consistently. But I am still concerned about the Battlehawks. I think with Wilkins, you're going to see a little bit of a regression. We saw this with Dormady, right? First game when a backup quarterback comes in, a lot of times they do play really, really well. But then the rest of the league kind of catches up to him a little bit. I think that the running he was able to do, I think of a full week of preparation, even the defenders, even the Renegades defensive coaching staff and defense can maybe find a way to slow that down a little bit, right? So I just don't think that. I believe Wilkins was named the starter. I believe McCarron is not going to play. So for those reasons, I'm gonna go Arlington. I think they're gonna return to Earth, and I just think that the Battlehawks still they are fairly beat up, right? Like Ja'Cour Pearson has been out. Like I don't know what his status is. They still had that emotional game at Birmingham 2 weeks ago. I still think there's some residual effects to that. And again, with the Renegades, they're just coming up from San Antonio last week, so I just feel like their travel is so much less than all these other teams. I think that is going to give them fresher legs. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think it's going to come right down to the wire. So I'll take the 3.5 points in my back pocket. Give me the Renegades. Obi.
I'm gonna go Battlehawks. I think that they're going to be able to cover 3.5. I think 3.5 is enough. This isn't some major spread like last week. Honestly, even with the amount of injuries, I think honestly, and this is probably going to our parity point. They have a little bit of wiggle room, not a whole lot. The Battlehawks to kind of rest guys, who are beat up and injured. So I imagine in these couple of weeks, leading to the playoffs, maybe they start to sit some guys down, even if they think, oh, he could play like A.J. McCarron. He could play, but maybe we just sit him one more week. But I think the Renegades, just like you said, Coach, they're at a point now. They've found ways to lose games, and it's just not their year. I know we said that they got hot last year, but there's no Luis Perez trade coming to save them this time. Luis Perez is not walking to the door. He's already there. So,
yeah. I will say this, though. One more thing on my side, though.
Yes.
This line stinks. It stinks.
Yes.
This stinks to high heaven. There's something up with this line. Because you're talking about a 6-2 team that's a favorite to go to the UFL championship game is only a 3.5 point favorite against the Arlington Renegades. That's kind of why I like the Renegade. I mean, because you could say, hey, that's great value. St. Louis should easily, because in my mind, this is going to be like an 8.5 point spread, honestly. Right. So I was shocked. I had to pick my jaw off the floor when I saw 3.5. But that just tells me Vegas knows something. I feel like at that line, they're anticipating a bunch of people to jump on the Battlehawks. They know they're going to take it to the bank. This happened I can't remember which game, but if you guys remember, there was one other time this year when I was like, this line stinks. And I took like what I'm doing now, and I won that side. So just sometimes when you see these strange lines, it just there could be more to it. So that's another reason why I'm going to go Renegades. However, I completely agree with your points. Like in my mind, this spread should be much larger. All right, CP, what do you think?
I think the odds makers are just looking at the last time these two teams played. There was a back and forth game between Luis Perez and AJ McCarron, with the Battlehawks kicking a game-winning field goal when Nick was just screaming, "Let him score! Let him score!" in that game. So, that's really what they're looking at. So I like it. With some of the sports books giving you 3. To Tugboat's point, I think this could be a push. Could be a 3-point victory, which obviously if I take the 3.5 on the Battlehawks, I would lose. But again, my whole mantra this entire season is don't be smart. Just don't overthink it. Don't try to beat, what odds was, those kind of behind the scenes things that they know that we don't know and run to pick. So in this instance, I'm picking the team that has something to play for, which is they are trying to continue to play for home field advantage. So that they can have all their screaming Kaká Nation people come up and show up to their playoff game. Otherwise, the Brahmas could potentially catch them and get that home field advantage. So I'm going to take the Battlehawks. I like it better at 3 or 2.5, but I'll take the 3.5, just knowing that they have something to play for, and the Renegades are playing for Bob Stoops' job. I don't know what they're playing for.
And this is why you listen to CP and not me, because I do look for those little angles. That's why I'm at 50%. He's at 68%. So seriously, this is a good lesson in sports betting here. But I would argue, just to take the Renegade side and take an argument here, in a league like this, I feel like what they're playing for is themselves. Each and every one of those players is motivated to play as best as they possibly can to advance to the next level. So I do think there's still motivation. I don't necessarily think that the Renegades are lacking motivation. It's just some kind of focus issue or something. But point well taken. I do agree with all the points that CP made. All right, Nick, what do you have on this one?
I think the offensive line for the Arlington Renegades is just dreadful, and that really showed itself against the Brahmas. Luis Perez was under harassment the entire game. He also had a bad game himself against the Brahmas. With the St. Louis Battlehawks having something to play for, they're going to go out. They're going to actually try to play really hard. I don't think the Renegades are going to quit on them or anything like that. I think they're going to give it a go. It's just their offense can shred our defense, and our offense, it's looking dreadful right now. Only scoring 9 points against the Brahmas is just stuck in my head. So I got the Battlehawks winning this. I also like Wilkins, the way he played last week. So he's a fun watch, by the way. A little bit of a wild card, but he was fun to watch. So I think they're going to pull it off and win it and beat the spread.
All right. So we got consensus except for Coach Kovo here. So FBI Tugboat Man closes out on this first game.
Yeah, absolutely. First point. One of these teams has been trending upwards. The other team has been trending downwards, and then lost, the most popular quarterback in the United Football League. We also just saw this game. A lot of my points are going to be what CP said a little bit earlier. I love the don't think about it. I love the don't think about it advice there, by the way. I really feel like this is going to be a close game, and when we're the other side of the ball, the defense here for the Arlington Renegades, not great. Offensive front line right there, not too great. But Perez has been able to work around the field and get it going most of the time. I don't think you can compare the St. Louis Battlehawks defense over there to the San Antonio Brahmas defense. Not just the behind with Son of Bum, right? But this is a Battlehawks squad that has won so far off of trying to get into shootouts and then winning those shootouts out of the hands of AJ McCarron. They don't have that. I'm taking 3.5 all day. I'm not saying that Arlington wins this, but I could definitely see like a 1-point victory off of, again, a repeat of what we've seen in previous weeks with St. Louis kicking a game-winning field goal.
I knew I liked you, Tugboat, man. So you and Coach Kovo were the only ones taking the Renegades, and so in Stoops we trust. I guess I don't know. I don't know if I can really say that, but we're gonna go Renegades on that side. And moving on, this is the marquee matchup of the week. Again, we talked about
Agreed.
Commissioner Johnston and The Rock have a problem in terms of the meaning of these matchups. Are really bad, honestly. Except for this one, you could see some intrigue. Honestly, there's not necessarily like seeding to play for, but at least they're two evenly matched good teams. You got the Birmingham Stallions, of course, coming in at a perfect 8-0. They got the 35-28 victory at home against our Houston Roughnecks. An 8.5-point spread. That's large, in my opinion. Yeah. It's large, even though it's an undefeated team. You're facing the 6-2 San Antonio Brahmas. They are locked in for the playoffs. They're coming off the 20-15 win against Arlington. Everybody knows I've been fading the Brahmas all year long. It's kind of obviously come back to hurt me quite a bit. I mean, they're 6-2. Obviously, my record is only at 50%, so that has hurt me. My read on the Brahmas has been off. I've been forecasting the fall. That hasn't fully come. I do feel like the same concerns I had from last year's Roughnecks squad, which is essentially your Brahmas of this year, I am seeing those same problems. I just feel like they have much better pieces. They have running backs that can really go off and break tackles and make plays. But there are times when this offense does continue to grind to a halt. It really did in points of this game and in games before that. To me, the Brahmas, their record is a little bit inflated. They are a team more so than any other team that has taken advantage of the 4th and 12 rule. There was 2 games where they were able to come back from behind at the start of that game in Memphis. And then it happened several more times, including a game against our Roughnecks. That was a game they were losing the entire game. Now, yes, they did fumble twice at the goal line, so they could have been up by 2 scores. I grant you that. But as a game, they've come from behind several times. You got to wonder, does the luck dry up at some point? I don't want to call it luck, but does that trend change? Not sure. However, I'm going to go with the Brahmas on this. I rarely go with the Brahmas, but I am going to go with the Brahmas. And again, the reason I said it, that defensive line is legit. I've done a poor job of acknowledging that. And those offensive skill pieces are legit. And it wasn't even Lovett last week. It was the other running back. Well, his name
Anthony McFarland.
McFarland, the former Steeler, right? So McFarland goes off. Like, they really are loaded in the skill position, and their O-line is good. They have a good O-line. Dormady seems like he's gotten over whatever funk that he's going through. So I'm not saying it's going to be a win, but at home, the Brahmas do a pretty good job with their home field advantage. And 8.5, that's just a lot. And, if the Stallions, you could argue they have nothing to play for. They're almost kind of like the Renegades, but on the opposite end, right? Everything's locked up. Maybe they start slowing down, making sure guys are healthy, getting ready for the postseason run. So I'm going to go Brahmas. I'm going to take 8.5 points in my back pocket. And one of the few times I'm going to take the Brahmas side for my guy over there in the Brahma bullpen, Josh. I'm going to go Brahmas plus 8.5 on this one. Obi.
This is one of the rare times I used to do this. We used to do this during high school football, coach, but I reserve the right to change my pick.
Sure, of course.
Here's the thing. This is one of the few matchups where these guys haven't played each other once before this year. So this is going to be the first time Stallions and Brahmas face off. I've been taking the Stallions all year long and up until, but I think twice this year they've proved me right. Last week was a large 15.5, wasn't it? Now we're at 8.5.
8.5, yep.
The Brahmas, I think the Brahmas provide challenges where I don't think the Brahmas will win, but they could make it close. They can make the game boring, like having a good low line that can make this a very stale game. And then just naturally, I think just the Stallions kind of taking the foot off the gas, especially being undefeated. It's just a matter of winning games. They're not trying to really blow anybody out. So for those reasons, I'm going to side with you, coach, and I'm going to take the Brahmas to cover. Do I think they'll win? No, but I do think they'll be able to stay within 8.5.
All right, CP.
It's going to be a defensive battle. I mean, the Brahmas have a great defense as well. We know the Stallions are one of the best defenses talent-wise. So I think in a low-scoring game, 8.5 points is way too much. So I definitely don't think the Brahmas are gonna win the game, but easily within the 8.5. So I'm taking the Brahmas.
All right, Nick.
I've been saying it all year. The Stallions' defensive line and offensive line are so overmatched the opposing team week in and week out, and this is no different. I know the Brahmas are really good on defense. They should. You would think they would be able to hold up, but that offensive line for the Stallions should be able to keep them back. I still think they want to go get that win. They're playing the Michigan Panthers again, too, right?
That's right.
So they
last
do
week of the season in the first round of the playoff or the semifinals.
Is there a fluky way where the Panthers could actually take the lead in the division if they lose 2 games?
They could take the lead, but they wouldn't get home field because Wayne State graduation.
Oh, right. Forgot about that. So what's the point?
Low blow.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I still think the Stallions are going to go out there and they're going to play, and they should be able to dominate them. I am starting to get more with Coach Kovo on this AJ Smith offense. It does seem to be very okay, like very average. And it doesn't matter which quarterback's playing on that. So give me the Stallions. They're going to beat this. They're going to beat the 8.5 points, and they should be able to win by a lot.
I like it. So both times so far we've had almost a consensus, but then one of us members has gone rogue, and this time it's going to be Nick. And so talk about which way you're going on this one.
Yeah, definitely going to be going over here to the San Antonio Brahmas. You guys said it. This is simply too many points. Excuse me. Also, just simply look at those previous matchups, right? This is the San Antonio Brahmas defense that just held the number 2 overall defense, or maybe not overall defense, but at least passing defense in the UFL to only 15 points, to only 2 scores total right there with our extra point conversions and whatnot. And you look on the other side, you look at the other defense. What did the other defense just do? The Birmingham Stallions just allowed 28 points to the Houston Roughnecks. No shade there. No shade
Sure.
there, but this is not exactly a squad that is known for its offensive powerhouses. And I think, sorry, but that is reflective within their overall record right here.
Yeah.
You add that in the Stallions not having much to play for because outside of the undefeated streak, right? Outside the undefeated streak, and they now have incentive to not play players named Adrian Martinez and stuff like this consistently. Because why would you want for them to get hurt going into week 10, which is a preview of the USFL championship, and then obviously 1 week after that, no break, guys. 1 week after that, which will be the USFL championship. Yeah, San Antonio Brahmas all day long, guys. You want to get cheeky with it? I might even look at that money line. I might sprinkle a little bit on top, a little bit of flavoring.
I
If it's
love
gonna
it.
happen, I think it's here.
Chef Tugboat's gonna get a little sprinkle there on the Brahmas, and I don't think that's it's hard to go 10-0 because even the Stallions have not really been able to do it right. It's been the Gamblers, believe it or not, like our current Houston Roughnecks have bested them twice, over the past 2 years. So I don't think that's a bad pick at all, Tugboat. Now, okay, one thing I just want to point out for people that are new, like you may notice we don't do totals. It's just this show started as picking high school football games, so we don't do totals, and we just kept that format. And honestly speaking, I just don't even feel qualified to predict totals. I just think I've always felt it's just extremely difficult. So we just talk about the sides. So I apologize. If you want to look at totals, go to UFL Gambling Podcast. Those guys are great. They'll talk about that. Tugboat on Michigan Podcast. He talks about totals. It's just not my forte.
Not anymore, but not anymore, man. With the amount of like mixed extra points and the ability to go 1, 2, or 3, I have almost entirely retired from totals. I'll take 1 per week at absolute most.
Absolutely. So, but again, we got CP at 68% on his side, so you can still definitely make money here on H-Town Pick'em. All right, the Michigan Panthers. So this is our game. This is our game here. I know CP and I, our ticket holders, will be there in attendance. It's the final game of the season. I say this kind of jokingly, but like in leagues like this, in my opinion, there's always just that little bit of doubt that like this might be the last game ever, just because you never know how stuff goes in the off season. So I definitely wanted to be there. So I asked my wife, I said, please, I got to be at this one. And so I only missed one game. I did miss Mother's Day game against the Brahmas, just to stay home with family. But I'm going to be here for the Panthers. They're 3.5-point favorites. They're coming in at 6-2. They got the 24-18, kind of a ho-hum victory. I mean, they definitely were in control the whole time, but didn't extend like maybe we thought that they would. Still splitting quarterback reps between Brian Lewerke, the former Spartan there from Michigan State, and it makes me wonder though, is Etling coming back? I know I've heard rumors that he's kind of maybe, I don't know if you've heard anything, Tugboat. Anything on Etling? Is he?
I do not have any inside information to be spoken on Danny Etling and whatnot. I believe that Bryce Perkins is one of the greatest things this team has ever seen. If I'm Mike Nolan, I don't see a reason outside of not wanting to avoid injury that you do the split stuff with Lewerke again.
I tend to agree with you. I feel like they're going to start ramping up, maybe go from 50-50 to 60-40. And I don't know, eventually, but I would imagine Perkins is your guy in the playoffs. Yes. But we shall see. The Houston Roughnecks coming in at 1-7, probably in defeat. Perhaps their best game of the season. I mean, really, to go into Birmingham and just take them down to the wire, 35-28. Nolan Henderson gives you a spark. I think from what I saw from our guy Ace, from his reporting, Coach CJ Johnson in the presser said that he, assuming everything is healthy and good to go, like I think he's leaning towards Nolan Henderson starting this game. So that's something I'm personally excited about. You know, everything in my head tells me, if I was CP and I was following the logic, to me that this is great value on the Panthers. In my opinion, they should be favored by more than 3.5. So I think this line stinks too, to be honest with you. I think 3.5 it's strange for a team that's 6-2 versus a team that's 1-7. Maybe it's a little bit of recency bias because the Roughnecks looked good last week. You know, kind of CP pointed out that the Brahmas line is short, maybe because they played the Battlehawks well the matchup before. But it's one of those things where in my gut though, I am concerned about Michigan a little bit, Tugboat, because I feel like every time I'm just wrong on them. Every time I fade them, they destroy. You know, every time that I jump on the Michigan bandwagon, I jumped on them against that game against San Antonio, they got their butts kicked by the Brahmas. So I'm just having trouble placing them. And so this is our last game of the season. It might be the last game ever. I'm going to have a couple cold beers. I want to have fun. And so I'm going to take those 3.5 points. I'm going to cheer for my Houston Roughnecks. I want them in my back pocket. It's not just there's a little bit of homerism involved, but I don't know. I just feel like the Roughnecks are trending up. I feel like they're playing hard. Anderson gives them a spark. They looked pretty good. If we can just have one game where we don't completely shoot ourselves in the foot, maybe we get it done. Maybe we win outright, but I'm going to take those 3.5 points. Give me the Houston Roughnecks. Obi.
Well, you know, I try to be the optimist as much as I can towards our Houston Roughnecks. You know,
I see where this is going.
But the name of my game is objectivity. Coach already would it. You already know, Coach. I mean, I gotta keep it objective around here. And so with that,
I'm too emotional. That's my problem. It's not good for sports betting.
you're a loyal fan, Coach, and I guess I'm the LeBron of this sports podcast. I just take a ball and go wherever. But no, nonetheless, I just look at it and I say,
I'm like the Patrick Beverly. It's too much emotion all over the place. Right.
The Roughnecks, they are trending up, and you got to respect what they've done. Definitely, they gave a great effort last week against the Stallions, but at the end of the day, they are prone to shooting themselves in the foot. I think at this time, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. This is a team that is prone to make mistakes. They're prone to shoot themselves in the foot. And at the end of the day, the coaching, I mean, I hate to be the type of person to call it coach, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. They'll let them down at the end. And so as a result, I look for Michigan to not only win, but win. I think 3.5 is a generous line. Now, maybe if this was even 5 to 6, I would probably hesitate a little bit more, but 3.5, I'm taking that and I'm running with it. And I think it's fine.
All right, CP.
Last home game of the season.
Violate the rules, CP. Let's have some fun on Sunday.
That's right. Last game at historic Rice Stadium. I think they're talking about moving back to TDECU, University of Houston Stadium here next season. So what I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to the tailgating, looking forward to that with you guys for the Mother's Day game against the Brahmas. I brought my mother-in-law. My parents live in the Pacific Northwest, so brought my mother-in-law to that game, to the Mother's Day game. This game, I'm bringing my father-in-law.
Awesome, Brian. So, I love Brian.
So we're gonna have a great time tailgating. Hanging out with all the crazy fans, Predator couple, Rig Rocker, everybody in the crowd. We're gonna have a really good time. But objectively, just knowing the stats, okay? So the Roughnecks are the lowest scoring team in the league. They average 15.5 points, the lowest scoring team. And the Panthers have only allowed more than 20 points once this entire season. So they don't let people score for the most part either. So you put those two things together on the field. They already beat us by 14 points the first time we played. It's going to be rough. Not thinking about it, not being a fan, I'm picking the Panthers to cover the 3.5. But go Roughnecks. Let's go. Prove me wrong. Let's go.
I love it. All right, Nick, what do you have on this one?
I really like the way Perkins played last week, and if he is going to continue to start for the Michigan Panthers, I think they're going to be in good shape against the Roughneck defense. And then the Michigan Panthers defense has just been phenomenal this year. That's the big eye-opening part when they first hit the scene and started showing their true colors as a really good team. So I think they're going to continue playing really good defense against the Roughnecks. Roughnecks haven't shown too much on offense. This is pretty much all what CP is saying, and I have to agree with them. I got the Panthers to beat the 3.5.
All right, so we had consensus except for myself. I'm going rogue again. That's part of being a last place team. I got nothing to lose. I'm the last place team here, trying to play spoilers. I'm making some crazy picks this week. Tugboat, man, what do you have on this one?
Yeah, so you said it best. This is a cooked line right here. The problem that you see here, not really problem, actually the good thing, that you see pretty much across the league is that teams mostly do seem when they're ahead, when they're in the lead, they know how to manage the clock and stuff and just run it all the way out, trying to get first downs and whatnot. But if you're looking back at what you said earlier about the last couple of plays from the Houston Roughnecks last week, that's really where my mind goes to. And this is not a situation that happens by mistake. It's not a situation that Reed Senate just pulls out the flag and then everybody's like, oh yeah, I am gonna follow that guy at the end. CJ Johnson, he's got his iPad. He's over on the sideline for these last few plays for what could have been an amazing spoiler to the Birmingham Stallions season. That didn't happen by mistake. The big question for me is whether it's Nolan Henderson or it's Reed Senate, because I would almost be surprised if a similar type of situation comes down or does not come down in this game if it's close. If it's somebody on the Houston Roughnecks that's just trying to find that second W for their squad, and I'm not sure if CJ Johnson's going to get that done by any means. 3.5, I've seen 3. I would take 3 all day long, and even if I pushed it that night, I'd go to sleep soundly that night. 3.5, still happy with it.
No doubt about it. Some great analysis there. I think you guys make excellent points. I made a couple points. If you want to go Roughnecks, I've given you the points that you can sell yourself that story. But I'm a little I can't deny that the value here is with the Panthers. All right, now the DC Defenders are coming in at 3-5. They had the 26-21 loss at the Battle Dome. Played admirably. It looked like they may be able to bring it home, but they're 3-5. They are a proud franchise. I mean, they are a team that brought back a lot of guys. They even they've been questioned that, the people they brought in from the dispersal draft, they let them go, and they just kept their guys from last year. That looks like it's probably a mistake now. They didn't level up whenever we had the merger because they believed in their guys, and it's come back to haunt them. And so they are a proud team. I do not think they're going to fully quit. I know there are a couple games where it looks like they've quit, like that blowout against St. Louis, but I think that they're still going to play hard. Vegas agrees with me. They're 4.5-point favorites despite the troubles, but a lot of that may have to do more with Memphis than it has to do with them, right? Because Memphis is 1-7. They've really struggled all season, but they kind of played one of their better games against the Michigan Panthers last week, only falling 24-18. This is a game where I've faded Memphis all year long, and it's actually been one of my best plays is fading Memphis. It's one of the things I've kind of hit at a good percentage on. I was down on them early. They really have struggled. They looked better last week, but DC was my number one team in my power ranks at the beginning. I understand it's not been the way that it was expected, but I still think they're going to have enough pride to try to fight themselves back up to 500 and at least finish at that level. I think 4.5 is not too much to ask against a team like Memphis who's struggled. I think Michigan could have covered last week. You got the missed field goal. You had Michigan with Mike Nolan. They have a great defense, so they're going to play fairly conservatively. A 6-point lead for Michigan, they feel warm and fuzzy with that they're going to bring it home and cap it out. So I think Michigan wasn't inclined to take risks to try to get the cover or anything. And DC, their defense is a little more erratic. They make some plays, they also give up a lot of explosive plays. So I think they're going to keep the pedal to the metal. I think they're going to get past the 4.5. So I don't necessarily feel great about this one, but I'm going to go Defenders. That's going to be my only favorite of the week. I've gone 3 dogs, and this is my first favorite, but I'm going to go with DC to cover the 4.5 against the Showboats.
Yeah, I'm going to go with DC to cover the 4.5. I mean, I know we talked about Greg Williams and his defense, but at the end of the day, the Showboats have not shown that they're going to be the type of offense to expose Greg Williams, in my opinion. And, I think DC will come out to handle business. It's more so about me fading the Showboats as much as it is DC really just going to be able to come out and blow them out. But I think 4.5 is good enough, generous enough for them to come out. They're still proud. They want to get back to 500, and at least have something to salvage going into next season because you don't know what they're going to be able to bring in going, into the next year. It's not like they have, like we talked about earlier in the show, this big old draft pick that they can bring in. So a lot of improvement is going to have to come from within. But I look for DC to come out and take care of business.
All right, CP.
Showboats have the worst offense, worst defense. What can you say? How can you go against them? How can you pick them?
I just heard Showboats, and I was like, oh, okay, all right.
Just thought it was just switch it up. No. Worst offense, worst defense. You have a former XFL offensive MVP that probably has to show something up, to continue and live out his football dreams. So Tiamo, I think, will have a great game. I'm taking DC, the road favorites. Everyone's a road favorite this week. Taking them to cover the 4.5 points.
All right, Nick.
I think Fred Kais has done a wonderful job at hiding the fact this year, all year long, that he's actually got a terrible offensive line. It's been bad, but he does so much motion and play action and goofy little gimmicks to try to get the pass rush off that, he's done a good job disguising it. The good news for the DC Defenders is those Showboats have no one that can do a pass rush. So they should be able to dominate this game and get that win. I just like everyone else is saying, I can't see the Showboats. I don't know how they're going to even stay within close for this game. It also helps that the DC Defenders, I agree, they're going to have to play with a little pride, at least get to 500 at the end of the year. That's probably what they're playing for. And so I think they're going to go out and ball out this game.
All right. Last pick of the night. Tugboat, what you got?
Yeah, easiest right here. Jordan Ta'amu, DC Defenders. You described their defense as erratic earlier. I think that's fair, but I think it's a little bit more predictable when they're playing against a team that's good, or in this situation,
Sure.
a team that is not good. Team that is not good at all. Also, Jordan Ta'amu is going to have enough time to write his memoirs in the back. Jordan Ta'amu, a life in football, living in the pocket out of Memphis, Tennessee. Guys, I like. Come on, right? Like numerically. With what John DeFilippo has, like losing the locker room is a phrase I would be comfortable using for CJ Johnson, the Houston Roughnecks.
Mhm.
The next team that I would feel comfortable using it with is the Memphis Showboats here and John DeFilippo. Everything that I expected this team to do before the season has not happened. This is the lock of the day, lock of the week, lock of the century here for me.
Oh, okay. So there we go. So that you read my mind. We're going into the locks to close this out. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that one in green. This is Tugboat's lock of the week. You know, you guys have really kind of swayed me towards this DC because in my mind, I'm making two like far out picks of the Renegades and the Roughnecks for me, right? Like I'm taking a wing and a prayer there. I'm not going to lock that in, right? I would not recommend you bet this necessarily because those are going to be hard for me to cash on those. But I think I was going to go Brahmas, but I like everything I've heard about the Defenders. I do feel strongly they're going to cover this. However, just sometimes it can get wonky on covering the 4.5, right? Like with all different kinds of extra points and things of that nature. So while I do feel very strongly DC is going to win, I just like getting that 8.5. I just think 8.5 is pretty inflated. And this is just a tip of the cap to San Antonio because I've faded them all year and they've made me eat it. So I'm going to show them in a sign of atonement, in a sign of respect. I am going to lock in the Brahmas. It's the first time I've done this, but maybe the first time I've picked the Brahmas all season. I'm going to lock in the San Antonio Brahmas for my lock of the week. Obi.
I'm gonna go St. Louis Battlehawks against the Arlington Renegades.
All right, I like it. We got some variety here early on. So we got 3 different locks already. What about you, CP?
I'm gonna lock in the Panthers. Roughnecks. Let's go Roughnecks. Really? No, I think of all the matchups, I feel iffy even on the 4.5 with DC and the Showboats to lock that one in. But that would probably be what I would think. And I think if we're thinking about power rankings, the farthest spreads between the two teams are between the Battlehawks, Renegades, Panthers, and Roughnecks. So between those two, as a bettor, I feel more confident in the Panthers beating the Roughnecks.
No doubt about it. All right, Nick, what about you?
I got bad news for our sweep because I've got the DC Defenders as my lock as well with the Tugboat there. So apologize in advance, guys.
No worries at all, man. This was so much fun. Tugboat, you've been a great guest, man. Anything you want to share as far as what you're doing or anything you want to say to our fans before we sign off?
No, not really. The Panthers Picks podcast. I'll probably just link this stuff right here, or maybe just do a shorter one this week. But other than that, guys, check out the Michigan Panthers podcast at FBI_Tugboat on literally everything. Very much appreciate you having me on. Been an absolute blast so far.
Absolutely, man. We loved having you. Everybody go out to the game on Sunday. Have some fun out there. Be safe, and let's root for the Roughnecks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all down the road.